Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And tonight we're going to talk about a new era in Birdland that is coming up as the Orioles confirmed reports that had surfaced earlier this week on Wednesday night that the team is on the verge of being sold to David Rubenstein, who will be leading a group of investors that includes, among others, Cal Ripken Jr., Michael Arrighetti of Ari's Group, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and former Baltimore Mayor Kurt Smoke. We're going to break that down on tonight's episode. Not just what it means in the short term, but what it could mean in the long term for the baseball operations side of things. We'll get into that in just a few minutes, but first I want to turn it over to Bob, who's going to introduce a new member of our Patreon community.
Yeah, we got a new sign up here at the AA level, paying a year up front. Greatly appreciated. Join the Discord already. It's Billy B. Go ahead and follow in his footsteps if you want to get into that Discord, get into our top 50 countdown as we're nearing the halfway mark now. A lot of cool features, or if you just want to support us, we greatly appreciate it. And Billy B was the latest to do that for us. So thank you, Billy.
We'll dive in now to the latest news surrounding the Orioles, which is the pending ownership change, which the Orioles confirmed with an announcement on Wednesday. A report had surfaced first from John Orend of Puck that the Orioles were about to sell the controlling stake in the franchise to David Rubenstein in a structured deal. Now, we don't know exactly how things are going to play out, and MLB owners still have to approve the deal. But this brings about an interesting dynamic. Rubenstein, a founder of the Carlyle Group and a Baltimore native, had been linked to the team back in December via report by Bloomberg. It has since surfaced in reports that he was interested in the Orioles as long as 6 years ago. So this is a guy that's been interested in buying the team for a while. Meanwhile, he's joined by a group that is going to include Orioles Hall of Famer Cal Ripken Jr., as well as some of the others that I mentioned at the top of the show. They're going to be buying the team from the Angelos family. At this point, MLB still has to approve the sale of the team. And that's something we're going to be waiting on. The owners are set to meet soon, but we don't know yet if a vote for the sale is going to be on the agenda or not, or if so, exactly how it's going to play out and how soon Rubenstein and his group will be taking over the franchise. Suffice to say, it's not going to change the dynamic of the rest of this offseason, but it could change a lot going forward. And Nick, I want to start with you. Just what is your reaction to what is going to be soon a changing the guard here in Baltimore?
I really don't know what to think yet, to be honest. I guess I had a totally different experience, I guess, last night when this news broke. I just saw it and was like, okay, that's cool. And I think I was diving into Senior Bowl day one practice reports, to be honest, last night. I just I need information. That's just kind of how I always am. Get all the information, process it, and then think, what is this going to mean? And right now it's just I'm not skeptical at all, but I'm just hesitant because we don't know what this is going to mean. What are his plans with the organization? I guess I will say it's great that we don't have to deal with Johnny anymore. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, but the grass on this side with the Johnny Boy in power, I don't even want to say his real name. That grass is dead and shriveled and there's nothing there. So it doesn't take much to be better. But I don't know. There's just a lot of speculation and assumption over the last 24 hours, and we don't know for sure. But I will say, as the last 24 hours have unfolded, it is a lot of fun to kind of dream on what type of baseball we could be watching on a nightly basis here. With when you combined this player development staff with hopefully a higher payroll, because I truly do think that all the pieces are here, from the ground up, from the dirt and the brand new complex in the DR to Camden Yards. I really do think that all the pieces are here. The coaching staff's here, the development's working, all of it is in place. And I feel like we're just kind of one missing piece almost away from a dynasty here in Baltimore. And that's just this infusion of cash, willing to spend even just a little bit of money. We don't have to be the Dodgers, right? You don't have to be Steve Cohen, but there is a healthy medium there between where the Orioles have been and a team like the Dodgers that can get this roster in a place where it's a perennial contender. But like I said, we'll see. I mean, hopefully, it's obviously not going to change anything this offseason, but hopefully next offseason we start to see a change. In the meantime, hopefully we start to see, less DJ Diesel concerts at Camden Yards, like more actual investments into the fan experience. Like, I don't know. And it's also just cool that Cal Ripken's a part of this. They're local ties. He is a local. Rubenstein himself is a local man who is, like you said, he's obviously an Orioles fan. Cal Ripken involved. You've got other local dignitaries involved with this. So hopefully we're seeing a fan, someone who is doing this. Obviously, the purpose is to make money. He's not going to do this if he's going to lose money. But someone who genuinely wants to see this team succeed, someone who is genuinely going to say, okay, you want this for the analysts, the scouts, they say you want this guy, right? But the old regime would say the cap is I'm just 20 million a year. I'm just throw a random number out there. 20 million a year. Asking price gets up to 30. Orioles say, nope, we got to be out. We're not doing that. Now, maybe with new ownership in charge, they say, well, let's go to 40. Let's go to 45. Who cares about an extra 15 million? If the scouts say, the computer says, let's get our guy, let's go get our guy. Hopefully that's what we start to see. I don't know, but like I said, we'll have to see over the next year of what exactly his plans are.
Yeah, let's not bury the lead. Grant Hill is a part of this. He's going to be part owner of Orioles. No, this was amazing news. I'm suffering with some jaw pain, potential wisdom tooth stuff. So I'm miserable. Yesterday, the news comes across. Someone accidentally tags everyone, and by accidentally, I mean brilliantly, tags everyone in the Discord. And I see the news, and I'm immediately just really excited. It's real. It's spectacular. I tell my wife, "Oh my God, this is the best news that happened to the Orioles maybe in my lifetime." What is it? The Angelos just are selling the team. Stare like, and what does that mean? I'm like, it means we're gonna have a real owner. I mean, potential. It could be great. It could be. We could still get a poor owner, which I have a feeling Mr. Rubenstein. I mean, he's 74 years old. I don't think he's getting in this to strip this to the studs and start over and make as much money as possible. I feel like this is a guy that bought a Magna Carta for funsies and then donated it to a museum so that people could watch it. I think he's going to at least be better than Angelos has been and spend a little bit more money. Maybe we see some extensions for these great young players that are coming up through the system. But yeah, so very exciting. I just think it doesn't even matter what the rest of the offseason brings. They could trade for a pitcher. They could not. This offseason is going to get an A+ from, I think, a lot of Orioles fans just because the future, it's not walking a tightrope of, okay, we have to be the Rays where we're developing these guys, we're bringing them up, but we also have to monitor who's getting arbitration when, who's going to reach free agency when. We're doing 1-year deals on free agents. That tightrope is just become a nice little wooden plank bridge that you could drive a truck over. And yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what Elias can do. I don't think really that much is going to change as far as the strategy goes with Mike Elias and company, but I think this will just open up the reins, open up the checkbook to be able to do actually what he wants. And I feel like Rubenstein's the type of guy. I think he even tweeted out like something about great leaders just let this, I don't know. He tweeted something that was like, oh, so yeah, Elias is going to stay and be allowed to just continue building this team up to what he's got. I'm sure that's a part of the reason why he really wanted to purchase the Orioles was because he saw what has happened the last few years. And yeah, hopefully that continues. But we could be the Dodgers of the East. We could be the new Yankees. No, I doubt it. I mean, you do have Michael Bloomberg. There's a lot of rich people involved, but at the very least, we can have a middle of the road payroll instead of a bottom barrel payroll, and that could make a huge difference when you have a smart front office and smart baseball people, as the Orioles do.
Yeah, I'll quote here in part from Rubenstein's statement just to bring context to some of the things that Bob was touching on. In a statement that he put on X on Wednesday, part of it read, quote, "I look forward to working with all the Orioles owners, players, and staff to build upon the incredible success the team has achieved in recent seasons. Our collective goal will be to bring a World Series trophy back to the city of Baltimore. To the fans, I say, we do it for you. We can't do it without you. That was just part of Rubenstein's statement on Wednesday. Now, in that, he says all of the right things, which you're going to do at this hour if you're him. I think the real test is going to be once he is in there, how much does he buy into what Mike Elias has done? Because it's clear that what Mike Elias is doing is working. So that's really going to be the thing that I'm looking for, is the commitment to say, we like what this group is doing. We're going to put more resources into it. And I think John Mioli at the Banner really hit the nail on the head earlier today in an article that he wrote, kind of looking at what that scenario could look like. And Nick, I'll go back to you because you just kind of touched on this as Mioli did earlier today. It doesn't have to be about going out and signing the most expensive free agent every offseason. But if there are players who fit your model that you're maybe $5-10 million short on the asking price, being able to go out and get that guy.
Yeah, I mean, just look at this offseason. I was trying to think. I know Josh Hader obviously got the big money. Diva Boy got all his money. I don't know who like number 2 on the list was as far as like top relief options this offseason. I was trying to remember. I don't know, whoever that is. But like as Orioles fans, wouldn't you feel a lot more confident going into the year if maybe you didn't go out and get Josh Hader and Blake Snell, but you landed whoever number 2 was this offseason? And that's not Craig Kimbrell, and Jordan Montgomery. Like, you'd be sitting pretty, and that's not breaking the bank. That's spending a good chunk of change, but like that's not breaking the bank. And that's obviously 2 signings that this regime was never going to do. And I don't even know if the Orioles, analysts and scouts are saying Jordan Montgomery is a good pick, but I'm just saying like that tier of player. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. We don't need to be the Dodgers. He doesn't even have to be a Peter Seidler type owner, but if we can just move towards that scale a little bit here, that side of the scale a little bit, then it is a nice just breath of fresh air here. It's like it's late January, we're hours away from February, so pitchers and catchers are reporting. This new season is upon us, and now we've got new ownership, hopefully on the way. I feel like I don't want to like jinx it. I don't want to sit there and like start jumping up and down yet and jinx it because this is the Orioles and something would happen to fall through. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice. It's nice to know that maybe next off season you can't automatically cross off Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery. We're not automatically crossing names off the list because we know the Orioles aren't going to go after. Maybe we do go after. What did I see? The
Juan
list.
Soto.
That'd be the dream. Even like the Zach Wheelers, right? Maybe, just maybe, we could go after Zach Wheeler. I think he's one of the top arms available. Like, it's more hope and optimism at a time where even though it was a crappy offseason, we're already getting hopeful and optimistic about a brand new season because we're baseball fans. That's what we do. But now it's like taken to a whole nother level once this does get finalized and in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've no doubt that it's going to be finalized. I'm sure MLB is just as excited as Orioles fans to have the ownership situation change in a better way in Baltimore. Maybe we get an all-star game soon. But I would think if Mr. Rubenstein really wants to endear himself to Orioles fans, it probably wouldn't take long to be like, where are you at with Adley Rutschman's agent as far as an extension? Because I will do what it takes to just push that right on across. Let's get that done. And, let's see what Mr. Scott Boras has to say about Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holiday. Like, I don't know. That's the one thing I'm like most optimistic about changing as far as the money goes. It's being able to potentially keep these guys, even if Gunnar is associated with Scott Boras as his agent. Maybe it's a little bit more possible if Mr. Rubenstein's willing to shell out the big bucks. But speaking of Boras, did he know something that nobody else did? Because all his guys are still available, and the Orioles might have a tax influx coming in a few weeks or a month. But no, I doubt that. I doubt anything's going to really happen. I bet you the plan is still the same right now as far as this offseason goes. I still think they're going to try to trade for a starting. But man, would I love to see that Adley Rutschman extension announcement in the next 6 weeks or so.
Well, let's go to that. What should be the top priority for David Rubenstein over, let's say, the next 12 months? Is it being more active in the free agent market, or is it getting it to these extensions? And that's not to say he can't do both, because he surely can. But if he's got to look at one over the other, would you rather see him go out and spend aggressively next offseason or invest in the core and go from there?
So I think Bob brought up this point in the chat. Yesterday, there was obviously everybody was so excited and there was a lot going on. So I think you said this first, and it was a really good point that there's some, maybe some concern by some people about like, what could he do when he comes into power? Like, is he going to change the front office? That whole regime that's in power now, could that be kind of disrupted or anything? And I think it was you, Bob, that said maybe one of the selling points here for Rubenstein was knowing that Elias and his people are in charge, and look at what Elias has done with minimal resources. He's built this team that just won 101 games and won the AL East and is on the verge of becoming this dynasty. Now, if you just add my financial backing to this, what could we do? So I do think that if that is the case, then coming in and getting these extensions done, and then that's a two-way street as well. Like, Adley has to want to sign an extension here in Baltimore. Gunnar has to want to sign an extension to be here in Baltimore. Clearly, money does talk. So I'm sure they could flash some extra zeros on these contracts and maybe get something done. But I think personally, I'd like to see the homegrown talent. Like, okay, here's the backing of not just here's to the fans. Let's give, I'm going to say Gunnar, for example, because I think he did like the tweet about Gunnar Henderson winning Rookie of the Year. So clearly he's a fan of Gunnar. It's like, all right, here's a homegrown guy that the Orioles drafted and developed. This is going to be our shortstop, third baseman. Doesn't matter to me, regardless. Either way, he's going to be stellar at whatever position he ends up at. This is the cornerstone, the keystone of our lineup here for the next, 10 years or so. Gunnar Henderson, and here's a big fat contract. You're an Oriole for pretty much life. I think that would be a pretty stellar way to kick off your ownership tenure.
Yeah, and be like, hey, Cal Ripken's part of my ownership group. We got the next Cal Ripken right here, Gunnar Henderson, 12 years, whatever, the Julio Rodriguez deal. If Boris and Gunnar are amenable to that. But yeah, I do think it is just keeping that core that's already come up and that is yet to come up. Maybe Jackson Holliday gets the pre-debut deal, but I doubt it again because it's Boris. But maybe Kobe Mayo gets a pre-debut deal. Maybe Samuel Basayo a year from now gets that. I think Adley, though, makes the most sense other than Gunnar. Gunnar makes the most sense if it wasn't for Boris. But since Boris is involved, I feel like it's a little bit of a tougher sell. But Adley, it should have happened already. And if Angelos was, obviously we don't know the reason why there's no extension there yet, but if Angelos was the reason and he was like, my max offer is 6 years, whatever, million, and Rubenstein's like, Mike, what do you think? He's a catcher. I know your analytics and your things say he won't, perform past 33, blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't care. You will pay him for a couple extra years when you think he's going to be past his prime, and give him like $3 million extra per year. Let's get this done. That to me is just like, I would not be shocked if a lot of extension deals get done in spring training. I would not be shocked if, as we get close to this thing getting approved and wrapped up, if Adley Rutschman gets signed to like an 8-year extension, which would take him through his age 32 or 33 season, I believe. Maybe 33, I think. So that just makes so much sense to me. Honestly, I'd be surprised if Adley doesn't extend at this point. It just is the perfect way for David Rubenstein to just come in and show how invested he is in this group. And obviously, if there's a free agent that makes sense, let's at least be serious contenders for them instead of, oh my gosh, what if the Orioles shock us and sign this guy when we know it's never going to happen?
I think that with Rutzman, and that's a good place to start, because I believe Mike Elias when he says that they're interested in extending players. I believed Eve Rosenbaum when she was on our show last year. and talked about how they have people working on this every day. I do believe that. But if the resources aren't there to get these deals done, that's a whole different challenge beyond what your model thinks a player is worth. Now, I don't think, I'm sure that there are downsides to extending certain players, but with Rutzman, you can just look at it and tell he's the cornerstone player that you were hoping he was going to be. Gunnar Henderson is going to be a star in this league for a long time. And there's other players in this organization that fit that mold too. So at some point, that's got to be a priority. I mean, we haven't even touched on the pitchers in this conversation. What if it does make sense to lock up Kyle Braddis at least until free agency, or Grayson Rodriguez a year or two beyond when he's going to hit free agency? So there's a lot of places you could go with extensions that, we don't know this for sure, but it's entirely possible the resources just haven't been there to get it done.
Yeah. And I think one other thing too that it could show potential free agents next offseason and off seasons after that. Like, all right, this organization is taking care of their own first and foremost, right? They're dishing out big bucks to their homegrown guys. Maybe they're a little bit more serious about this money issue now. So that would be obviously a great starting point to lock down the core, make sure they're locked down for the next few years. But also, like, even some of the other roster spots, it's also kind of fun to sit here now. Obviously, the sale's not even final. So again, we're just speculating. We're jumping the gun as well. But it's also fun to sit here and think about, like, hey, a guy like Anthony Santander, not even just the super young guys, but some of the veterans like Santander. I went on Locked On Orioles and talked about Santander. We've talked about Santander here on this show about, yeah, he's probably just gonna, play this year out. Maybe you extend the qualifying offer, but then again, could the Orioles not extend the qualifying offer out of fear that he accepts the qualifying offer, and then they got to pay him? Was it 16 million or something? So maybe they just end up losing Santander, or he gets traded as a corner outfield rental piece later, and you're selling really low on him. Well, now it's like, all right, maybe we don't have to also concern ourselves with trading away these guys just because, like, there's a cheaper younger prospect waiting in the wings. Like, maybe you can come in and give Santander an extension if he's going to play this year like he has the last 2 years. Why not extend Santander for 2-3 years, whatever it may be? It's just, like I said, it's just fun to sit here. We can go in 20 different directions and kind of dream on what could happen, but it's at least nice knowing that it's potentially a real possibility now, not just us, in a bold prediction segment here before the season starts.
No, it's a good point, but I think Cedric Mullins, a guy, 3-4 year extension candidate, maybe potentially soon as well. But the one thing, and I'm trying to pull up the quote here, we could do the Luis Castillo thing that the Mariners did when they traded for him a couple years ago. Baltimore Sports Providence says on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, by the way, Corbin Burns could be an Oriole this deadline and get an extension in season. Yeah, that seems way more realistic now than it did 2 days ago. So, yeah, I think the money is not everything. The Orioles, clearly, they just showed that this past season. Won 101 games on the shoestring budget, and all the roadblocks that the front office had as far as financials go. But it does make your job a little bit easier if you open that up a little bit. Gives room for error. You don't have to worry about being perfect. You can take a risk here and there, and not have to worry that if it doesn't work out, we're hamstrung and won't be able to go after anyone else the next year. So it's just we already talked about how the possibilities were endless with how this team could go from like a on the field level a lot. Well, now it's the possibilities are endless on the other side too, with the extensions, the money, and it's just going to be interesting to see even what Rubenstein comes in and does. And he now has control of Masson. Like, is he going to make changes there? Is there's going to be changes as far as PR and advertising the team and just trying to get the Orioles out there in the open? Like, there's just so many ways, under the radar ways, and just behind the scenes that could improve as well. So very interested to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah. And I think something else, I can't remember if it was Andy Koska, who has done a lot of great work the last 24 hours, or if it was John in John's article. I can't remember where I read this, but it's even going to trickle down to, we're a minor league podcast. We can bring this into the fold here. It could also trickle down into the minor leagues. Like if you, there's possibly more resources now. And like, to be fair, like Angelos did bring in Mike Elias. I'm not saying anything new here, but I like Andy Koska. I don't know if you guys saw this. He was also on the Foul Territory show, which I haven't really watched before. I might have seen clips before, but I don't know. I saw AJ Pierzynski talk for the first time on that podcast. I was like, I don't know if I want to watch this anymore. But unnecessary shot at AJ Pierzynski there, but whatever. But I thought Andy did a fantastic job in that interview, and because I think they were really trying to get him to kind of dance on the grave of Angelos and John, that is, and like. And Andy is fantastic, of course. And he was like, look, not to dance on the grave of Angelos, but he did bring in Elias, and he did let Elias kind of do his thing, minus the spinning, obviously, but the DR facility and the minor league side, the player development, the draft resources, all that stuff. Well, now if you got this more infusion of cash coming in, maybe that also trickles down to the minor leagues. Like we talk about Aberdeen all the time and all the upgrades when we had Daryl Hernazel, and I think that was probably one of the more eye-opening interviews. And he talked about what it was like playing in Aberdeen and some of the things like they weren't fixing, like could small things like that be fixed, and that continue to help the player development process as well. I think that wealth is trickle down economics. We're not going to get into that, but some of that wealth I think could trickle down into the minor leagues as well. And it's again, from the top to the bottom, everywhere in between, I think could potentially benefit here.
Shout out to Andy Koska too, by the way, and the rest of the Baltimore Banner team, Daniel Allentuck. Fantastic coverage of all this since it broke, and really enjoy reading all their stuff they're putting out.
Yeah, absolutely. Great coverage over there. And I should mention Pamela Wood, too, who's not part of the Orioles beat, but a very good political reporter. And we're glad to have her here in Baltimore. Speaking of the Banner, I would recommend going over there to check out Danielle Allentuck's piece that was published on Wednesday morning, just to get a full sense of what is going to come in the process here before the sale is going to be finalized. And the key thing is that MLB will have to approve it. It will require 22 of the other 29 voters supporting it to go forward. The next time the owners will meet will be February 4th through 6th in Orlando. We don't know yet if the Orioles sale is on the agenda then, but you have to think that if it's not, it's going to be in the near future. And it's rare to see deals like this turned down, and I definitely don't see it happening in this case, given that you have Rubenstein coming on board, who is worth billions of dollars, backed by two other billionaires in the purchase. So it would look like that once this gets to the owners, it's going to go through.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind that's going to be the case. And I don't know exactly how it's set up. I don't really follow these big sports purchases like league wide or even just like industry wide as far as other sports and stuff. Rubenstein, he's 74. Is that a normal age for someone to buy a team? But again, you have a couple younger guys that are also billionaires there. So I don't know. That stuff's a little over my head. That's where I'm still like educating myself as far as reading all of the things that are out there. But yeah, I know the owners have a meeting next week. I think it's not on the agenda as of now. Maybe it could be put on the agenda. Maybe they have to do their due diligence, and then in a month or so they'll do another, little get together to vote and officially make it official. That's the word I'm looking for. And yeah, so did we talk about how John Angelos will still be a major advisor, and he will give all his beautiful insights to Mr. Rubenstein, even after Rubenstein is the controlling person?
Again, that's just saying the right thing. I think at this point, I don't know. I also not getting into like the behind the scenes stuff here about how these sales work and controlling ownership versus who has what percentage and what all this means. I really don't care. honestly, like this has been good for content for the last 30 minutes or so, but like at the end of the day, I just care about the players on the field. I want to see the players raising the championships and bonging beers. I don't need to see the owner bonging beers in the clubhouse afterwards. Um, but at the same time, like it is, I don't know. It's just nice that these are all people with local connections as well. Like it seems like everyone in that group is a local connection. And so I think obviously Major League Baseball is going to approve this. They clearly don't care who runs these teams. I don't think any organization actually cares like who runs the franchises. I'm a Cowboys fan. I know firsthand, like they really don't care who runs these organizations and if they run them into the ground or not. But yeah, it's good. That's kind of adds to the hope, though. I'm probably veering off the topic, the original question, but at this point, but it's the fact that they all have these local ties. Maybe there will be like genuine interest in getting this team a World Series, and not just one, but like multiple World Series over the next couple of years because this team is primed and ready for it.
I gotta say though, it is going to be nice. Look, David Rubenstein, he seems like a more public person, good speaker. I think he's got his own podcast, or at least he does some kind of stuff like that. It's going to be nice to have someone speak with the media and not put their foot in their mouth every time a camera is in front of them. And I think any press conferences that he's involved in will be a little more fun to watch and not in a let's see what goes wrong this time kind of way.
You mean he's not going to open the books?
Not today, anyway. Not on backwards day.
I think this has nothing to do with like there's no comparison because I work for a smaller startup company, but the CEO of our company, like he sold about a year or two ago, whatever, and he stayed on as this advisory role. Technically, I've never seen or heard from him in 2 years. He's gone. He's done. So when I saw that, like that's what immediately popped into my mind. Like, okay, he's gonna hang around or whatever. Blah blah blah. This is how you do. Make sure you get this paperwork done. Make sure you get that paperwork done. Blah blah. But like 3 weeks later, he's counting his money because the man is pulling in almost $2 billion. Like, but that's that. Not irks me. It's what happens. But you know what? If that's what it takes to go away, like go count your $2 billion, $1.7 billion elsewhere. He's going to hang around for 2-3 weeks, and then he'll be gone. And it's just a title at this point.
Yeah,
like
that
it's fine.
that obviously is just like they can't say we're going to sell you the rest of the stuff after our dad dies. I mean, that's a little dark there. So yeah, it's just a thing where, all right, this is what it's going to say on paper. But honestly, I doubt he'll even be in the picture for those 2 or 3 weeks that you're saying. And yeah, so God, just can't wait for it to be official at this point and just watch the dominoes fall. But like you said, I mean, we're here to watch the product on the field, and hopefully this just enriches the product on the field, gives the front office more weapons to do what they do, and gets the players paid and to be able to stay here and let us watch them become local legends and grow up in this hopefully better environment. So it's been a pretty solid offseason off the field for the Orioles when you consider the lease agreement and now this.
Well said. And with that, that does it. This look at the ownership change. We will be back with our second episode later this week. And we're going to actually turn our attention back to the minor leagues. And we're going to talk about possible breakout candidates. That will be on the next episode of Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. In the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, X, TikTok, and on Substack at oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community where you can sign up for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels, have access to exclusive daily coverage. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down our potential breakout candidates in the Orioles minor league system for the 2024 season. And we're really turning our attention in this episode to the players who may be new to the system or who maybe are a couple of years in but seem like they're poised to take a big step forward in 2024. And the way this works is we're each going to give a hitter and a pitcher that we want to discuss. We'll start with the hitters first before we get into the pitchers and talk about why we think they're going to break out. Maybe it's because they're coming back from an injury. Maybe it's some underlying metrics that suggest that they're about to take a step forward, or they're going to thrive in their first full year of pro ball. So with that, I'm going to start with Nick, because Nick has selected a hitter that a lot of Orioles fans have been really interested in since last year's draft and are waiting to see what he can do.
Yes, I gotta switch gears here after the ownership talk there. I know Bob had Jake Cunningham. Jake Cunningham is my hitter pick. I know Bob had Cunningham on Wednesday. We're trying to record this for the future, and I mess up my days. Wednesday, Bob had it. So I have it. I've listened to it by the time this show comes out. And if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, if you're watching on YouTube Live, sorry. But I haven't listened to it yet as of Wednesday. So if I repeat anything, sorry, I will listen to it tomorrow, though. Patreon.com/ontheverge for daily podcast breakdowns featuring our top 50 as we approach the 2024 season. But yeah, Cunningham is a guy who I watched a lot of when he was at Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. That team had a tremendous outfield last year, but Cunningham specifically was considered one of not just the top outfielders or top hitters, but one of the top athletes in last year's class, and not just the Orioles draft class, but the entire MLB draft class. And you're talking about a guy with plus speed, plus power potential. He can stick in center field. We'll see how the outfield situation kind of shakes out at each level of the minor leagues, because there's depth everywhere, but he's got a big arm. We saw it in a few games last year with Delmarva where he robbed a home run. He's hitting opposite field home run. I think he only had like one or two at Delmarva, but it was an oppo field shot. I think this guy, looking ahead, his full development, he reaches the major leagues, he could be a guy who, hits 20 plus home runs a year, steals 20 plus bags a year. I think coming out of college, he was posting a 90th percentile exit velo of 111, which is absurd. It's literally insane that he's hitting the ball that hard. And I think the knock on him was the plate. Despite having good plate discipline and plate recognition, like there was contact concerns, maybe a little bit of swing and miss, but I think he's in the right org, obviously, to fix that. I don't think the swing and miss is going to be a concern when he's got the power and speed that he does. And I think it's kind of hard to find any prospect in this organization, honestly, who has the power, speed, athleticism, defensive, all that combo. It's Jake Cunningham's. He's not in a tier of his own, but he's certainly a little bit more unique, I think, than a lot of other prospects in this organization.
Yeah, the tool shed. He's a guy that, like you said, he's hitting for that power. I think in a workout for the Orioles, he maxed out at 111 exit velocity with a wooden bat, and that's obviously his 90th percentile with the metal bat. So clearly can hit the ball hard. I think he struggled in college with pitches 92 mile per hour and up, which I think, like you said, he's in the right organization, I feel like, to fix that and kind of get used to that, rein that in a little bit, close the gaps in his swing for the swing and miss stuff. I know the Orioles have a lot of drills where like they move the pitching machine like half the distance to the mound, so it's coming at you faster to get your reflexes up, and they do like that really tough batting practice, so you're struggling in practice. It makes it look a little bit easier when you're actually in the game. But what I like is that while he's this big power hitting athlete at the plate, he also apparently can stick in center field. Apparently he's got really good instincts for center field and is quick enough, mobile enough, good enough arm to play out in center field, could play all three outfield positions, steals bases. I know he had an ankle injury, didn't steal many bases at all in his final year in college, but then he came back out in his professional debut and like stole 3 or 4 bases in the short time that he had, put up good numbers. But again, FCL Delmarva, that's not really saying much. We'll see what he does. I'm assuming he starts either Delmarva or Aberdeen this season coming up, and we'll see what he's able to do, what positions he plays the most, and if they give him the green light on the bases. Yeah, I think he's just an exciting guy to follow this year because he's another go at a John Rhodes type who's just, you got all the weapons. Can you put them together and become that 5-tool guy. I think one of these guys is going to hit, and they drafted a lot of similar type players in this past draft with these toolsy, fast outfielders that can also hit the ball pretty hard.
Yeah, Cunningham may very well turn out to be, if he can come close to his ceiling, one of those guys you look back on this draft in 3 or 4 years and wonder how did the Orioles get him there. What I would say with Cunningham is I wouldn't be shocked if he maybe gets off to a little bit of a slow start next year, because he did have some injury concerns last year. And as you both touched on, there are questions about his contact and whether or not the hit tool is going to be consistent. But you look at the skill set that he brings to the table, and it's easy to see where if the Orioles can address the contact concerns, as they have some players that have entered the system recently, his stock will really shoot up within the next year.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you guys thought that, Cunningham, if you viewed Cunningham as kind of this, John Rhodes on steroids type player. So I'm glad you brought up that, because I think he could be that 5-tool guy. And I also think that if he didn't have the ankle injury, I think there was another injury as well, he would have gone well within the top 100 last year, and the Orioles got him at 154. So keep an eye on him. My other guy is Trace Bright, my pitcher. I've already thrown out the prediction that Bright wins minor league pitcher of the year in 2024. So I guess I really couldn't go with anyone else for this topic here. But like, the guy's a 6'4" starter out of Auburn. And I think last year, just overall, it was a successful year. There were some ups and downs, but he did finish the year in Bowie with a 2.12 ERA, 20 strikeouts and 17 AA innings. I know he would have those outings where it's 10 plus strikeouts and like 0 or 1 earned run. And then he followed up his next 2 or 3 outings. He gets shelled. He can't make it out of the second or third inning. The results are kind of all over the place, but it's minor league baseball. And something we talk about a lot, especially at the lower levels, it's process over results every day of the week. And if you go back and read Bright's report on John Mioli's top 30 list over at Baseball America, he hits the nail on the head. And I think because he starts off by saying, what I think is one of the bigger reasons for the ups and down results when you look at Bright's season. But Mioli says Bright spent his first full pro season expanding his pitch mix beyond his college repertoire. I think that hits the nail on the head there. Like, he needed to improve. John notes specifically the slider and the changeup. And John noted that both pitches took pretty big leaps forward last year as the season progressed. The slider was more effective in the zone. The changeup became a swing and miss pitch for him. So yeah, I'd love that he was able to kind of work through all that in high A. And then they're like, all right, you're going to double A for the last 3 weeks or so. Show us what you learned. Like, you sit in class all year. Now it's time for the final exam. And I think I'd say he got like a solid B plus on that exam, graduated near the top of his class. And now you just keep building on that at the next grade level. Get up to Norfolk, hopefully at some point in 2024, and set yourself up for a big league debut in 2025. If he cleans up the walks, you've got a true breakout season, I think, on the horizon for Bright. And even if he struggles with the walks, you've still got a guy who was a 5th-round pick who throws, 97, 98 miles an hour with a good curveball, swinging his changeup. He'll find a role somewhere at the bullpen. So I'm excited to watch Bright this year.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it with Trace Bright. I mean, and this is honestly just like prototype what the Orioles can do with their pitching guys that they draft in the development system. You get a nice hoppy fastball. You find someone with another like go-to pitch, like with Kyle Branovich, the knuckle curve or whoever. And then you do what you do. You teach them the slider or the sweeper, and you teach them the changeup / splitter, which everybody's learning this offseason. And if they can make it work, they can expand that repertoire, like you said. They can become a starting pitching prospect when they're a 5th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, 10th-round pick. And if not, they'll always have that hoppy fastball and that whatever design off-speed pitch that they came in with. And maybe they learned a thing or two along the way, and they can become a weapon out of the bullpen. So I think this is just the Orioles have guys like this lined up one after the other, all the way from AAA all the way down. But Trace Bright, I do believe, is a guy that showed you that he could be one of the guys that becomes a legitimate starting pitch prospect and could really get some attention this year in the minor leagues. And I would not be surprised at all if he's just like striking out 30% of batters, and he ticks down the walks a little bit and really just gets up to AAA and is a guy that we're looking ahead to 2025 thinking, okay, when's he going to get his chance in the majors?
Yeah, I could absolutely see Bright heading down that path. And what I sort of see him as right now is a prototype of the kind of pitcher the Orioles go after for a lot of reasons that you both mentioned. And I think it's an important reminder that college ERA doesn't really mean a whole lot sometimes, because Bright had an ERA of over 5 in his last season in Auburn. And you look at what he accomplished in his first full year, despite some of the ups and downs early on, he really did put together a solid season. And I thought that he looked better down the stretch, which is not an easy thing for a pitcher who's in his first full year of pro ball to do. But I thought that over really July, August, September, Bright looked more consistent, more comfortable on the mound, and the clunkers that we saw early in the year just weren't as apparent. You wouldn't have those runs of bad outings that he seemed to be having like late April, early May, where he would have one good outing and then 2 bad ones in a row. That didn't really seem to be happening. So I think he was getting more comfortable on the mound. The stuff was there late in the year. And I absolutely think that if the Orioles can continue to harness the non-fastball part of his repertoire, they've got a potential starter on their hands.
Hope so. I think both of these guys, I just love both of these guys and think that, Cunningham, as high as I am on him, and as soon as I made the pick with Cunningham, I was jacked because I had watched so much of him. But I I don't know why. I still keep him so low on my top 50. And I think that's why he's kind of suppressed in our top 50. But as soon as he breaks out in those first couple of weeks, I don't know. He maybe starts with Delmarva. I don't know. I can't remember where, Bob, you had him projected to start out at, but I could see him starting out at Delmarva again. Regardless, the guy is going to break out this year, and I will have him firmly in the top 20 and Bright in the top 15 by the end of the year. Pushing top 10 for Trace Bright, probably with all the graduations we're going to see.
Yeah, I do have him at Aberdeen, it looks like, just looking at the spreadsheet, but I would not be surprised at all if he was back in Delmarva, just because there's a lot of outfielders there and he didn't get much time there at the end. So I don't think it would be for long if he was with the Shorebirds, but would not be surprised if that was the case. I guess I'll go ahead to my breakout picks. Shout out to Anderson De Los Santos, who I almost went with my bounce back and breakout, but that wouldn't be fun to just focus on one guy for both episodes. So I went ahead with a guy who I feel like if his signing was announced 2 months later, would have been a much bigger deal and probably would have cost a lot more money for the Orioles. And that's Jordan Sanchez, the Cuban defector, I guess, who signed for $450,000 in late November, early December. 18 years old, will be 18 years old all season long, all the way till October 9th. And just a guy out of Cuba who showed big power. What do you know? A guy that the Orioles signed internationally that hits the ball hard, has big power. In the Juan Pinto Academy, he batted .328 with 16 home runs and 57 RBIs last year, showing impressive power and contact skills. This is according to Sports Illustrated article on him. Says he's tall and athletic for his age. And the fact that he's already 18 when he signed, I think that can almost be a good thing. It's almost like Cesar Prieto when they signed him out of Cuba. They got a good deal because he signed later in the class. And I think maybe he starts immediately in Delmarva if he shows up in spring training and is impressing, or he starts in the FCL and then can make his way up from there. But I just think it's exciting. Another exciting international guy with power potential that we're not really talking about a lot because we just announced 20 other new guys with amazing potential as well. But just wanted to give him a shout out and kind of just get him included in that mix there.
Yeah, I feel like we should have added him and a couple of other guys they signed late. Technically, they would sign late in last year's class. So, we just did the international kind of recap episode. I don't think we mentioned any of those guys, but $450,000 with kind of that leftover money, with Cesar Prieto, we saw the rumors about what he could have signed for, or what he was projected to sign for in a normal period. I want to know how much this kid would have signed for. You look at his height and his size and his power already. I would not be shocked if this is a guy who is looking at close to $1 million signing bonus if he was just a regular international prospect and not constrained by having to leave Cuba, and the timing of that is obviously up in the air. So, yeah, I'm pretty jacked to see this kid. He could possibly end up being, I think, one of the top international signings, and we'll throw him into this class. But I think he could end up being one of the top guys, and certainly one of the guys who moves the quickest. But like they did with Cesar Prieto as well, and we saw it. We saw it with Prieto when he first joined the organization, and we kind of assumed, like, could he start in Double A? Like, how high could he start? We know that the Orioles they're not going to push these guys to the limit. Luis Almeida last year, we thought he's going to start in FCL. He was in the DSL. So I think for sure he starts in the DSL, and then we see how high he goes. But if he's hitting, he'll be stateside, I think, by early summer, midsummer.
Yeah, completely agree. From the little bit of video we've seen so far, which is mostly batting practice footage, I really believe that Sanchez is coming into this organization with a lot of raw power. And you add that in, a guy that hits from the left side, projectable frame. I think he's listed right now about 6'1", 175 or so. So he is going to get stronger. And you really want to see how that left-handed power develops. A lot more to discover here, but I like this pick.
Okay, well, then I'll move on to my pitcher, who is another guy who could go either way. Could see him becoming a pretty dominant reliever just because he has like this one knockout pitch that he can go to at will to get outs, I feel like, in short stints. But also, if he adds some velocity, and I will say his name eventually, if he adds some velocity and some consistency to his other off-speed stuff, I think he could end up being a starting pitching prospect. That's Cameron Weston, who was a 8th-round pick in the 2022 draft out of Michigan, signed for just under $200,000. He's 23, doesn't turn 24 until the end of August. And, he got a lot of time at High A Aberdeen last year at 22 years old. Got into 12 games, 3 starts, 40 innings pitched to a 2.68 ERA, struck out just under 30% of batters, only walked 7%. Does not give up many homers, but his one pitch is kind of like a Devin Williams-esque sidewinding changeup that is just beautiful to watch. And he's also got some interesting other off-speed pitches that could use some work, but show promise. And I think he's in the low 90s. I think he like sits 90, 91 typically, but maybe if he gets up to sitting 92, 93, they can do a little bit more with that as a starter profile. But in the meantime, I don't know. It's almost tempting for me to just say, turn him into a pure reliever and just watch him shoot up the system and, maybe even make the majors by the end of this year if you went that route. But something tells me they will continue to stretch him out and work on things and then eventually make the decision when one needs to be made.
Yeah, I pulled up my notes because I did Cameron Weston with our top 50 update a week or so ago. And there was an interview earlier or later last year when he was with Aberdeen. And according to Weston himself, he does have the changeup, a sinker, a cut fastball, a sweepy slider that the Orioles developed since he was drafted, and a harder slider and a forkball. The kid's got all of it. And yeah, it was like he was sitting like low 90s. I think he touched 96 in college. I don't know what he touched last year, but he was still sitting in the low 90s. So, but I think in this interview, I think it was a Steve Molesky interview that I completely missed. I only found when I was doing the research earlier the other week for that episode. But he mentioned this offseason, his goal was to add more weight and bulk up and add more velo. So I'm anxious to see what that velo is. But yeah, and even just he had an injury, and I think it was, I'm trying to find it here, what exactly it was, tendonitis. He developed tendonitis right at the end of spring camp. So that's why he didn't start until later in the year. But when he did, super high ground ball rate, a lot of strikeouts. And the interesting note that I was trying to pull out of here, his starts, he was using the piggyback role, and he was always part 2 of the piggyback, except for 2 outings last year. And I thought this was a fun cherry pick stat, but which probably doesn't mean anything, but it's still fun to look at. In the 2 times where he started the game, he went 5 innings in each of those starts, which was a season high, and he had 15 strikeouts to just 1 walk. So overall, just good year, interesting guy. I think he's a really fun case study here for the pitching development in this organization, because he could go in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what we saw from Weston last year. To be for someone who was just drafted, had just been drafted the year before, didn't really get much time in pro ball after the draft, to miss the first 2 months of the season, have 1 outing in the FCL, and then hit Aberdeen in mid-June with no prior high A experience, and get off to the start that he did. He went through his first 3 outings without giving up an earned run there, and that set the tone for what he did really well the entire time he was in Aberdeen. Keep the ball on the ground, don't walk anybody, and rack up the strikeouts despite not having that dominant fastball. And you both touched on it. He's got a really versatile repertoire of pitches. And the Orioles can go any number of ways with him. I think the hybrid role for now is good because you give him the opportunity to get stretched out and you can see where you want to build him up long term. But there's a number of ways you can go. And I really think that he's a guy that going into this year is poised for a breakout. I'll go over to mine now, and I'll start with my hitter, and that is Matthew Etzel, pick for the Orioles last year out of Southern Miss. And Etzel really had first started to burst onto the scene in 2022 with a really good run in the MLB Draft League with Williamsport. So despite a strong summer performance, he went unselected in the draft and then ended up transferring to Southern Mississippi, put together a good year last year in the Sun Belt Conference, and the Orioles were able to nab him in the 10th round. And then once he got into the Orioles system, he hit the ground running off a few numbers here. 91 plate appearances across 3 levels. He batted .314 with a walk percentage of just over 15%, strikeout rate just under 19%, a 164 WRC plus, and 2 homers. The one question that you see with Etzel that pops up from time to time is the power. Right now, MLB Pipeline has it just at a 40 grade, but you can see glimpses of raw power there that's easy to see where Etzel maybe could top out as a low to mid double digits home run hitter at the highest level. You combine that, though, with the fact that he's got a solid hit tool, an excellent defensive skill set that includes good speed, good fielding range, solid arm, and he's got a little bit of everything. He may not be a true 5-tool player. He has a little bit of everything, though. And Nick, I think you hit that nail on the head recently in one of our Patreon episodes for the countdown. But I see Etzel as one of those guys that coming into this year has a really good raw skill set, has been able to build on that and get progressively better over the last couple of years in college. And the Orioles, with further refinement, can allow him to take it to the next level. The 2 things that I really want to see this year, number one, how much power is there? Because we saw glimpses of more power than what a lot of the scouting reports suggested last summer. So was that a fluke, or is that a sign that there's a little bit more there than what we realized at this point? And the other thing is I really want to see him get some time in center field, which is not going to happen a whole lot as long as he's playing alongside Enrique Bradfield Jr. But hopefully there comes a point where maybe Bradfield gets promoted a little bit ahead of Etzel and Etzel gets time in center field, or they start to mix and match the 2 as the season goes on, because it seems like he has everything you're looking for defensively in a center fielder. It's just that he came into the Orioles system last year and predominantly played right field because he was alongside Bradfield. So there's a lot of unknowns, I think, with Etzel, but the promise is real. And you look at what he did last summer, and I think it's easy to get excited.
Yeah, got off such a great start. And I'm not going to lie, he's got a little bit of a funky swing. He's kind of reminds me of like a left-handed Billy Cook in a way, a guy who's on the come up. I mean, it's not the worst comparison, but he can certainly go get it defensively. Like I was saying with this last draft, these college guys that they got, like all these center fielders, all these guys that can play all 3 outfield spots. and definitely an athlete, definitely that hit tool. And I think we've seen that the Orioles, they can get some extra loft out of guys that just hit the ball hard. So I think we saw that with Jordan Westberg. I mean, he wasn't like a guy that was projected to have 20 plus homer power when he was drafted. I feel like you could say that about him now, though. So yeah, very intrigued to see how Etzel develops. He again, he was walking, he was getting on base, stealing tons of bases. All these guys are like really fast. They have good hit tools, can go get the ball in center field and hit the ball hard. And yeah, you just hit it in the air a little bit more, and all of a sudden you're a much better prospect as soon as you do that. And I could see that happening for Etzel absolutely this year.
For whatever reason, I just feel like he's gonna continue to get overlooked as well, even if he does put up the numbers. But that's kind of been the story with him throughout his like whole career because he's got a fun kind of backstory where he started at Texas A&M, and I don't even think he made it to baseball season his freshman year before he transferred, but he crushed it at the JUCO level. He went to the draft league, like Zach mentioned. He crushed it there. I think he was considered one of the top hitters in the draft league, which the competition isn't great, but it's designed to give guys like Etzel some play and some run, and get all their data out there in front of MLB scouts. But still didn't get drafted. But then he goes to a top 25 program in Southern Miss, a very good college baseball program, and was like their everyday leadoff hitter and excelled. And I think the Orioles found a real gem here is what 10th round draft pick. Again, the power is going to come. He hits for a good average. He gets on base at high clip, and the stolen bases. I mean, this if you go back to his entire college career and you include his time with the Orioles, I think as well. This guy was I lost the numbers. He was like 93 for 104 in stolen base attempts in his career, going back to his JUCO days. But he did. I think I found another interview where he talked about how that was his focus since joining the organization, was tapping in to more power, and hopefully next year pumping up the exit velo numbers. He's made the tweaks to his swing. He did that back in college, started getting more power. So hopefully the Orioles continue that trend. Again, one of those guys who was on the come up, and the Orioles decided to grab him. I think I would not be shocked at all if he's kind of on the Calzer, Mayo, Ortiz, John Rhodes list next year of guys who we see his average exit velo jumps like 3-4 miles per hour from last year to this year. And I kind of mentioned when I think I had Etzel as well in the top 50 program. I kind of said I get Colton Calzer vibes here with Matthew Etzel in a sense that like he's teetering on this balance of like, I don't know, do we get more power out of him and hope that doesn't like sacrifice like more strikeouts or cause more strikeouts or the average to go down or the walks to go down? Or do we just lean into this, you're going to be a gap to gap guy with speed and be a table setter type guy? It's going to be fun to see kind of where the Orioles decide to go with his development.
I'll go over to my pitcher now, and truthfully, it's a guy that I could have picked for our bounce back episode a couple weeks ago, but I felt like it was a little misleading because this is someone who doesn't have much of a track record in professional baseball, and that's Juan Rojas, the young left-hander who, on the night we're recording this, actually turns 20 years old. So happy birthday to Juan a couple of days later. Rojas was part of the Jorge Lopez trade, was the youngest pitcher that came over in that deal from the Twins. At the time, he was in the FCL. He would finish the season in the FCL with the Orioles. And coming into last year, he was a guy that looked like he could emerge as a good starting pitching prospect. Ticketed for Delmarva, had a fastball that typically ran in the low 90s, but could hit the mid 90s sometimes to go as a really good slider and a developing changeup. Unfortunately, an injury kept him out well into the summer, and then when he came back, he struggled. You look at the numbers, especially the walk numbers, and they're not pretty between two levels, but you got to remember it's only 32 innings that he pitched last year coming off of the injury. I don't think that he had his full repertoire back, and I think that getting the opportunity to have a normal spring training leading into the start of the regular season, an opportunity to build up, get comfortable on the mound in a full season ball environment is going to do wonders for Rojas, even if it doesn't show itself right away, because the foundation, I think, is there for him to be at least an interesting left-handed pitching prospect. you kind of look at the tiers right now of pitchers in the farm system, and you've got 3 in the Orioles organization that are left-handed, that are young, that have some potential. You got Luis De Leon, you've got Davy Cruz, you've got Juan Rojas. Those are 3 guys you could pick out right away. Rojas, of those 3, does not have the most exciting stuff. I think Cruz and De Leon definitely are more what we come close to considering electric, but there's still a really solid arsenal of pitches that Rojas has to offer that the Orioles, I think, can develop and really over the next couple of years see him grow as a pitcher. And I think that as long as he can get a full healthy season in this year, you're going to see glimpses of that.
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised he pitched at all in 2023 after we heard he was injured coming out of camp, and it took so long for him to get into the game action. I think the fact that he came back and pitched at all is probably a good sign as far as 2024 goes, and bouncing back or breaking out. He could do both. Yeah, I think, there's a reason he was targeted in that trade. At the time, he was one of the more intriguing guys, I feel like, for us when the trade went down, being so young, a lefty, and like the repertoire, like you said. I think by now he might be at the bottom of that list just because Yunior Cano popped. Cade Povich is obviously in our top 15-ish area. No spoilers for the countdown, but and then Juan Nunez kind of broke out a little bit last year, or at least continued to emerge. And for the fact that Rojas barely pitched at all, and when he did, it wasn't exactly successful too much. Kind of puts him behind those guys, but I still think there's plenty of potential there, and he's still pretty darn young. So plenty of time to go. And yeah, I like him a lot still.
Yeah, just the trade that keeps on giving. Like you mentioned, Povich could be in the big leagues at some point this year, and Cano's coming off an all-star season. And if you're paying attention, like Juan Nunez, if he has a breakout year this year, it's not going to be sneaking up on anybody, because I think some national outlets have been giving him some love. But yeah, I don't know what the injury was. I think I remember doing some like Instagram sleuthing and feel like maybe it was elbow related, but I don't know if I've ever seen anything like 100% exactly what that injury was. So I'm just speculating there. Regardless, he didn't pitch until closer to the end of the year, like you guys mentioned. So I really don't care about the numbers that he had done there in Delmarva in the FCL, because you look at go back to his rookie ball numbers, the strikeout and walk numbers were phenomenal. And so that was his claim to fame. I think it was rebounding from the injury. Like Zach said, maybe the stuff all wasn't there. Maybe he's trying to, pitching a little bit more cautiously in whatever that injury was. I don't know, but I'm giving him a kind of complete reset button going into this year, and just excited to see what he can do. I imagine he starts the year in Delmarva. I just want to see what it looks like. And kind of 2 things. Does he get those walks back down? Was that just a result of the injury? And if so, great. And then, like you guys mentioned as well, the velo, because I know when he came over from Minnesota, it was like 89, 90, 91. So like if we can get that velo up and the walk and strikeouts look good again with Delmarva, he's right back on path. Because like you said, he's just turned 20. He's still a super young guy. So plenty of time in his development. Just keep the strikeouts up, keep the walks down, get the velo up. He's like, what, 6 something? He's a potentially beefy kid. I think there's more velo in there as well. So hopefully we start to see that from him.
And of course, as other players break out in the 2024 season, we're pretty confident in these 6 guys breaking out. But as more players break out in the 2024 season, we will be with you every step along the way. We are getting closer to spring training, which means our top 50 prospects countdown is ramping up right now. We're about to hit the top 25. So if you're not a Patreon member already, go over and subscribe. And for as little as $3 a month, you can be a paying member at the $5 and $10 levels. You will have access to bonus daily coverage. In addition, you can check us out on our multitude of social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, as well as Substack. We're over there at oriolesontheverge.substack.com. We will be back next week. We might be joined by a special guest. Stay tuned for an announcement on that. In the meantime, for Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.